The house was the only place where the silence still sounded like my mother. Until I found the notice taped to the front door. It wasn't a greeting. It was an eviction. My stepfather, Brent, hadn't bothered to call. He just left a cold, scrawled addendum at the bottom of the legal paperwork. You have 10 days. The house is sold. In 3 seconds, the grief I had been nursing turned into a cold, hard knot of fury. The house on Sycamore Street was the only place where the silence still sounded like my mother. Even 3 months after the funeral, the air inside held a faint, stubborn trace of her lavender laundry detergent and the dry vanilla scent of old paperbacks. It was the only reason I could sleep at night. I pulled into the driveway after a 14-hour day at the firm, my mind a gray static of spreadsheets and client retention strategies. I turned off the ignition and just sat there for a moment, staring at the front porch. The porch light was off. I made a mental note to change the bulb, a simple domestic task that felt manageable in a world that had recently spun off its axis. Then I saw it. A white rectangle was taped to the front door, standing out violently against the dark mahogany wood. It fluttered slightly in the evening wind. My stomach did a slow, heavy roll. In my line of work, tape notices were never good news. They were summonses, condemnations, or warnings. I climbed the steps, my heels clicking too loudly on the concrete, and ripped the paper down. Notice to quit. The legal boldface shouted at me. I scanned the boilerplate text, my brain struggling to reconcile the legal aggression with the address. This was my home. This was the house I grew up in. This was the house my mother had paid for with 20 years of double shifts at the hospital. And then, at the bottom, a handwritten addendum in blue ink. I knew that handwriting. It was cramped, sharp, and slanted to the right. You have 10 days. The house is sold. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Sold? That was impossible. The estate was still a mess of paperwork. Brent, my stepfather, had told me just last week that the probate courts were backed up for months. He had told me to take my time, to grieve, to just keep the utilities paid while he sorted out the heavy lifting. A car door slammed behind me. I turned around. Brent was standing in the driveway, illuminated by the harsh yellow glow of the street lamp. He was leaning against his silver sedan, arms crossed, wearing that beige cardigan my mother had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He looked calm, terrifyingly calm. I walked down the steps. The paper crinkled in my fist. Brent, I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort to lock it down. What is this? He didn't flinch. He looked at me with a practiced, weary sadness, the kind he had been wearing like a costume since the funeral. It is time to move on. Kennedy, he said softly. I cannot keep up with the maintenance, the taxes. It is too much house for one man. You did not tell me you were listing it. I said, I live here. He sighed, a long, tragic exhale that suggested I was being unreasonable. You are a guest. Kennedy, you have been staying here to get back on your feet. But the will was clear. Your mother left everything to her surviving spouse. That is standard. That is the law. That is a lie. I snapped. Mom told me specifically. She said the house stays in the family. She said she wanted me to raise my kids here one day. Brent stepped closer, invading my personal space with a casual arrogance. His eyes, usually a watery blue, looked hard and flat. People say a lot of things when they are sick. Kennedy, the law does not care about sentimentality. The law cares about the deed, and the deed is mine. He gestured to the paper in my hand. I have a buyer, a cash buyer. Practically, it is a good deal. It settles the debts she left behind. Debts? My mother did not have debts. She was obsessive about her credit. You have no idea what your mother had, Brent said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You were off in the city playing consultant. I was here. I paid the bills. I took care of her. And now, I am settling the estate. He pointed a finger at my chest, not touching me, but close enough that I felt the heat of it. You have 10 days to vacate. If you make this difficult, if you try to drag this out, I will have the sheriff remove you. and I will make sure everyone in this town knows why. I will tell them you are squatting in your dead mother's house, making it impossible for her grieving husband to pay her medical bills. Is that the legacy you want?" I stood frozen, the wind biting through my blazer. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that cardigan off his back, but the consultant in me, the part of my brain trained to handle hostile boardrooms, kicked in. Emotion was a liability. Information was leverage. "I will be out when a judge tells me to be out," I said, matching his coldness. "Not because you taped a piece of paper to the door." Brent smiled, a tight, thin stretching of his lips that did not reach his eyes. "Suit yourself. But the closing is happening. You are just delaying the inevitable." He got back into his car, the engine purring to life, and backed out of the driveway without looking at me again. I walked into the house and locked the door behind me. My hands were trembling so badly I dropped my keys on the foyer table. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. Empty. Something felt wrong. The air felt thinner. I walked into the living room. The large velvet armchair was there. The television was there. But the shelves. I ran my hand along the built-in bookshelf. My mother's collection of vintage mystery novels was gone. 3 shelves. Completely bare. I rushed to the kitchen. It looked normal at first glance. Clean surfaces. The coffee maker in the corner. I yanked open the 3rd drawer down on the left. Empty. Her recipe binder. The red one with the spine held together by duct tape. It had her handwriting on every page. Notes in the margins. The recipe for the pecan pie she made every Thanksgiving. It was gone. I ran upstairs to the master bedroom. Brent had been sleeping in the guest room since she died. Claiming the master was too painful. I pushed the door open. The closet doors were wide open. Her clothes were gone. All of them. I checked the top of the dresser, the jewelry box, a mahogany chest with a pearl inlay that she had inherited from her grandmother, was missing. He wasn't just selling the house. He was erasing her. He was liquidating her existence before I could even process that she was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress devoid of sheets, and forced myself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. Panic would not help me. Panic was what Brent wanted. He wanted me to crumble so he could sweep me out with the rest of the debris. I needed to know what was happening. Legal facts, not Brent's gaslighting. I went to my room, the only room that still looked untouched, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I navigated to the county recorder's website. My fingers flew across the keys, searching for the property address. 1402 Sycamore Street. The records loaded slowly, a spinning wheel of death that made my heart hammer against my ribs. There it was, the most recent filing. Deed transfer. Grantor. Estate of Eleanor Hale. Grantee. Brent Hale. I squinted at the date. It had been recorded 3 weeks ago, only a month after the funeral. I clicked on the document image. It was a standard quitclaim deed, transferring the property from the estate to Brent as the sole owner. It cited a specific will as the authority. I sat back, rubbing my temples. A will. I had never seen a will. When I asked Brent about it after the funeral, he had waved his hand and said, "It is a standard spousal transfer. Kennedy, do not worry about the paperwork." I had trusted him. I had been so consumed by the funeral, by the grief, by the sheer exhaustion of losing her, that I had let him handle the administrative side of death. I was an idiot. I scrolled down. There was another filing, pending, purchase agreement, status, pending closing. I grabbed my phone and searched for the listing. It popped up on Zillow immediately. Sold. The listing agent was Northlake Realty Group, a woman named Jessica Vance. I looked at the time. 7:30 in the evening. Too late to call a professional office? Maybe. But my house was being sold out from under me. I didn't care about etiquette. I dialed the number listed on the site. It rang 4 times. "Hello? This is Jessica Vance." Her voice was bright, professional, and completely unaware that she was speaking to a woman on the edge of a breakdown. "Hi," I said. "My name is Kennedy Wood. I am calling about the property at 1402 Sycamore Street." "Oh, wonderful. Jessica said. "We are very excited about that one. Are you the seller's daughter? Brent mentioned you might call to ask about the timeline." "He did?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Yes. He said you were helping coordinate the move-out. Such a lovely man. He has been so accommodating." I felt bile rise in my throat. Brent, the grieving widower, painting me as the helpful daughter while he evicted me. "I am not helping coordinate anything," I said, keeping my voice level. "I live here, and I just found out the house is sold. Can you tell me when the closing is scheduled?" There was a pause on the other end. The brightness dimmed slightly. "Oh, I see. Well, usually we do not discuss these details with anyone but the title holder. But since Brent said you were involved, the closing is scheduled for next Friday." "Next Friday? 9 days. 9 days. And the buyers?" I asked. "Who are they?" "I cannot give out their personal information." "Obviously," Jessica said, her tone cooling. "But they are a lovely couple relocating from Ohio. They are on a tight schedule, which is why we pushed for the quick close." "They are relocating?" I asked. "So they are moving in immediately?" "Yes, that is the plan. Look, Ms. Wood, if there is a communication issue between you and your stepfather, I suggest you speak with him. The paperwork is all in order on our end. Pinecrest Title is handling everything." Pinecrest Title. I memorized the name. "Thank you," I said, and hung up. 9 days. I stood up and paced the small room. I needed help. I needed someone with a badge and a gun to tell Brent he couldn't do this. I grabbed my purse and drove to the police station. The lobby of the Marlow Ridge Police Department was quiet, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. The officer at the desk was a man I recognized from high school. Though I couldn't remember his name, he looked bored. "I need to report a fraud," I said, leaning on the high counter. He looked up, blinking slowly. "Okay, what kind of fraud? Credit card? Identity theft? Real estate fraud?" I said, "My stepfather is selling my mother's house. He forged a deed transfer, or he is using a fake will. I don't know which. But he is stealing the estate." The officer sighed and pulled a notepad toward him. "Is his name on the deed?" he asked. "Now it is," I said, "but it shouldn't be." "Okay, but if his name is on the deed, legally, it is his house. He tricked the system." I insisted. "He filed it weeks after she died. My mother told me the house was supposed to come to me." "Ma'am," the officer said, putting the pen down, "listen. Unless you have proof that he forged a signature, like you have a video of him doing it, or a forensic report, this isn't a police matter. It is theft," I said, my voice rising. "It is a civil dispute," he corrected. "It is a probate issue. You need a lawyer, not a cop. We cannot stop a house sale because family members disagree on who gets what. If we did that, we would never do anything else. But he is evicting me," I said. "He gave me 10 days. Does he own the house?" the officer asked again. "According to the county, yes. Then he can evict you. He has to go through the courts if you refuse to leave. But he can start the process." I stared at him. The indifference was suffocating. "So you are telling me I can do nothing?" "I am telling you to get a lawyer." I walked out of the station, my legs feeling like jelly. I was furious. But beneath the anger, I was terrified. The system was a machine, and Brent had the keys. He had the paperwork. He had the grieving husband narrative. I was just the stepdaughter causing trouble. I drove home, the streets of Marlow Ridge blurring through my tears. I pulled into the driveway, half expecting Brent to be there again, waiting to gloat, but the driveway was empty. Inside, the house felt hostile. The empty shelves mocked me. The missing recipe binder felt like a physical amputation. I went to my room and sat on the floor. Leaning back against the dresser, I felt small. I felt 12 years old again, hiding in my room while my parents argued downstairs. My hand brushed against the back of the dresser. There was something jammed between the wood and the wall. I frowned and reached back, my fingers grazing paper. I pulled it out. It was a crumpled envelope, covered in dust bunnies. It must have fallen back there weeks ago. I recognized the return address label. Marla Quinton. Marla, my mother's best friend since college. She lived 3 towns over. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. I opened the envelope. It was a standard condolence card. Lilies and cursive sympathy. Kennedy, my heart breaks for you. She loved you so much. And then, underneath the printed sentiment, a handwritten line in shaky black ink. Your mother told me to remind you about the lockbox. She said you would know where it is. I stared at the words, the lockbox. A memory flashed in my mind. 6 months ago, Mom was sick, but she was having a good day. We were sitting on the floor of the hallway closet, sorting through old coats to donate. She had paused, her hand resting on a loose floorboard in the back corner. Under the winter boots. Kennedy, she had said, her voice serious. If anything ever happens, the important things are safe. You remember our hiding spot? Mom, don't talk like that, I had said, dismissing it because I wasn't ready to face the reality of her dying. Just remember, she had insisted. Under the boots. I scrambled up from the floor. I ran to the hallway closet and threw the door open. It was full of Brent's coats now, his heavy wool peacoats and rain jackets. I pushed them aside, shoving them violently to the ends of the rack. I dropped to my knees and started pulling out the shoes, his loafers, his running shoes. I reached the back corner. The floorboard looked seamless. But I knew the trick. I pressed down on the left edge, and the right edge popped up a fraction of an inch. I jammed my fingernails into the gap and pried it up. The wood groaned. There, nestled in the insulation and dust between the joists, was a small, gray metal box. I pulled it out, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. It was heavy. It wasn't locked. I flipped the latch and opened the lid. Inside, there was a single silver key on a plain ring and a folded piece of yellow legal paper. I unfolded the paper, my mother's handwriting. Strong, loopy, familiar, Ridgeway Community Bank, safe deposit. Below that, a list of dates. Just dates, no explanations. January 12th, February 4th, March 15th, and then one date circled in red ink, heavily. So the pen had almost torn through the paper. April 2nd. April 2nd. That was 2 weeks before she died. That was when she went into the hospital for the last time. Why had she circled it? What happened on April 2nd? I clutched the key in my hand. It was cold and sharp. This was it. This was the breadcrumb trail she had left for me. Because she knew. She knew Brent would do this. She knew he would try to erase her. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the moment. I pulled it out. A text from Brent. An image loaded. It was a screenshot of a reservation confirmation. U-Haul moving storage. Reserved for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. The text below it was short. Don't make this harder. You're out. I looked at the time. It was almost midnight. He wasn't bluffing. He was bringing a truck tomorrow. He was going to physically remove my things. He was going to strip the house bare before the closing next week. He thought he had won. He thought the notice to quit was the end of the story. I looked at the silver key in my palm. He didn't know about the lockbox. He didn't know about Marla Quinton's note. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a squatter. I was Kennedy Wood. And this was my mother's house. I stood up, slipping the key into my bra, right against my skin where he couldn't find it if he decided to raid my room again. He wanted a race? Fine. I wiped the dust from my knees. I checked the battery on my phone. 40%. Enough. I wasn't going to sleep. I had 9 days to stop a sale, unravel a fraud, and save the only thing I had left of my mother. But first, I had to survive tomorrow morning. I walked to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. Black, strong, the house creaked around me, settling into the night. It didn't sound like a sold property. It sounded like it was waiting for a fight. I sat at the kitchen table, the list of dates spread out in front of me. April 2nd. What did you do? Mom, I whispered to the empty room. And more importantly, what did Brent do to make you hide this key? The refrigerator hummed in response. I picked up my phone and took a picture of the note. Then a picture of the key. Backup. Always have a backup. Then I went to the back door and wedged a chair under the handle. I went to the front door and engaged the deadbolt, then slid the chain lock into place. If Brent wanted to get in here tomorrow to throw me out, he was going to have to break the door down. And if he did, I'd be ready. I wasn't the grieving daughter anymore. I was the opposition. The clock on the microwave blinked. 12:01 a.m. 9 days left. I took a sip of the bitter coffee and stared at the dark window, my reflection staring back at me. I looked tired. I looked pale. But for the first time in 3 months, I didn't look helpless. Game on. Brent. I pulled my laptop toward me and opened a new browser tab. Ridgeway Community Bank. Hours of operation. They opened at 9 in the morning. I would be there at 8:30. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the house breathe, waiting for the sun to rise so I could go to war. The next morning, the sun came up looking like a bruise, purple and angry on the horizon. I hadn't slept, but the caffeine was doing its job, keeping my hands steady and my brain vibrating at a high frequency. I heard the rumble of a heavy engine before I saw it. I went to the living room window and peered through the blinds. A large U-Haul truck was backing into the driveway, the beep, 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 cutting through the morning quiet like an alarm. Brent was driving. He hopped out of the cab, looking fresh and rested in a polo shirt and khakis. He looked like a man ready for a round of golf, not a man about to evict his stepdaughter. He walked up the path to the front door. I heard the key slide into the lock. The lock turned, but the door didn't budge. The deadbolt held. He jiggled the handle. Then he rang the doorbell. Kennedy? His voice was muffled through the wood. Open the door. The movers will be here in 20 minutes. I didn't answer. I stood in the hallway, dressed in my work clothes, my purse slung over my shoulder, the bank key burning against my skin. Kennedy, he shouted, losing the polite veneer. I know you're in there. Open the damn door. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. I didn't undo the chain. I cracked the door open 3 inches. Brent's face appeared in the gap. He looked annoyed. Remove the chain. Kennedy, we have work to do. No. I said, excuse me? I said no. You can move your things. You can move the furniture you bought, but you are not touching my room, and you are not touching anything that belonged to my mother until I see a court order. He laughed. A short, barking sound. I am the owner. I do not need a court order to clean my own house. You do if you want to avoid a lawsuit for wrongful eviction and theft of personal property. I said, channeling every ounce of legal jargon I had picked up from working with corporate attorneys. I have documented everything in this house. I have photos. If one box of my things ends up on that truck without my permission, I will file a police report for theft, and since the value is over $2,000, it will be a felony. Brent's eyes narrowed. He pressed his face closer to the crack. You are playing a dangerous game. I am not playing. Brent, I am protecting my assets. I slammed the door and locked the deadbolt again. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, listening. I heard him curse. I heard him kick the doorframe. Then silence. I checked the peephole. He was walking back to the truck, pulling out his phone, calling someone, probably his lawyer or the movers. I didn't care. I had bought myself time. I ran out the back door, slipping through the garden gate before he could see me. My car was parked down the street. I had moved it before dawn so he wouldn't block me in with the truck. I got in, my heart racing, and started the engine. Ridgeway Community Bank. I drove fast, watching the rearview mirror, half expecting the U-Haul to come barreling after me. But the road behind me remained empty. I wasn't safe yet, but I was moving, and for now, that was enough. The bank was a small brick building on the corner of Main and First. It looked solid, immovable, a fortress of secrets. I parked and waited for the doors to unlock. At 9 o'clock sharp, a security guard flipped the sign from closed to open. I walked in, the air conditioning hitting me like a wall of ice. I went straight to the desk. Can I help you? The teller asked. Smiling. Yes, I said, placing my hands on the marble counter to stop them from shaking. My name is Kennedy Wood. I need to access a safe deposit box. Do you have the key? She asked. I reached into my shirt and pulled it out. laying it on the counter. "Yes," I said. "I have the key." She picked it up and looked at the number stamped on the head. "Box 402. She read. "Okay, let me check the authorization card." She typed something into her computer. I held my breath. If Brent had removed me, if my mother hadn't added me. The teller frowned. "I am sorry, Ms. Wood. The box is in the name of Eleanor Hale. That is my mother." I said, "She passed away recently." "I am so sorry for your loss," the teller said automatically. "But I don't see your name on the authorized access list. It is just Eleanor Hale." My heart stopped. "Are you sure?" I asked. "She told me to come here. She left me the key. I'm looking at the digital file right now," she said, turning the screen slightly so I could see the blank fields. No deputies listed. "But I have the key," I pleaded. "Doesn't that count for something?" "Possession of the key doesn't grant access. Unfortunately," she said gently, "without a court order naming you as the executor or administrator of the estate. I cannot let you into the box. Privacy laws are very strict." I felt the room spin. A court order. The police had said it. Brent had said it. Now the bank. Everything required a piece of paper I didn't have. "Is there anyone else listed?" I asked, desperate. "Anyone at all?" She hesitated. Looking at the screen. "I really shouldn't." "Please," I said. "I think my stepfather is trying to steal her estate. I need to know if he has access." The teller looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the dark circles under my eyes, the desperation in my posture. She lowered her voice. "There is no one else listed," she said. "Just Eleanor. And there is a flag on the account." "A flag?" "Yes. An access attempt was made last week." "By who?" I demanded. "A Mr. Brent Hale." My blood ran cold. "Did he get in?" I asked. "No," she said. "He didn't have the key. He claimed it was lost. We told him we would have to drill the lock, but that requires a scheduled appointment and a fee, and since he didn't have the executor paperwork finalized yet, we turned him away. He tried to drill the lock. He knew about the box. He just didn't have the key. But now he was selling the house. If he finalized the estate, if he got that paperwork, he could come back here and drill it legally." "Thank you," I whispered. I took the key back and walked out of the bank. I stood on the sidewalk, the morning sun glaring down on me. I was locked out. Brent was closing in. The house was sold. But I knew one thing I didn't know yesterday. There was something in that box Brent wanted bad enough to try and drill it open. And I was the only one with the key. I wasn't out of the game. I was just changing the battlefield. I pulled out my phone and searched for the name Marla Quinton. If the bank wouldn't talk to me, maybe my mother's best friend would. I dialed the number. It rang once. "Hello?" "Marla," I said. "It's Kennedy. I found the lockbox." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, thank God," Marla whispered. "Kennedy, you need to come over. Now. I am on my way." I said. I hung up and walked to my car. The clock was ticking, but I was done waiting for permission. I started the engine and peeled away from the curb, leaving the bank and the polite rules of society behind me. The rejection at Ridgeway Community Bank sat in my stomach like a stone I had swallowed whole. I drove away from the brick building with the windows down, letting the humid Pennsylvania air whip my hair around my face, trying to dry the tears of frustration before they could fall. The teller's words echoed in my head. Court order, authorized party, privacy laws. They were shield words, designed to protect assets. But right now, they were protecting a thief. I had the key, I had the knowledge, but I didn't have the legal standing. In the eyes of the law, I was just a grieving daughter with a wild story. And Brent was the grieving husband with the deed. I needed an ally who remembered the truth, not just the paperwork. Marla Quinton lived in a split-level ranch 3 towns over, a house that smelled of cinnamon broom and lemon polish. She had been my mother's best friend since their sophomore year at Penn State. When I pulled into her driveway, I saw her kneeling in her garden, aggressively weeding a patch of petunias. She stood up as I slammed my car door, wiping her dirt-stained hands on her apron. When she saw my face, the polite greeting died on her lips. She dropped her trowel and opened her arms. I collapsed into her. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed to be held by someone who actually loved my mother until that moment. He sold the house. Marla. I choked out into her shoulder. He is evicting me. Marla pulled back, her grip on my shoulders tightening. Her eyes, usually soft and crinkled with laughter lines, went hard. "Come inside," she said. "Now." We sat at her kitchen table with mugs of strong tea. I told her everything: the notice on the door, the empty shelves, the missing recipe book, the lockbox I found under the floorboards, the bank turning me away. Marla listened, her mouth pressing into a thin line. When I finished, she stared into her mug for a long time. "I knew it," she whispered. "Knew what?" I asked. That he was pressuring her. Marla said. She looked up at me. "Kennedy, in those last few months, your mother was scared, not just of the cancer. She was scared of the logistics. She kept asking me odd questions. Like what? Like, what happens if someone tries to rewrite everything after I'm gone? And can a power of attorney change a beneficiary?" I felt a chill crawl up my spine. She asked that specifically? Yes. She called me one night, maybe 3 weeks before the end. She was whispering. She said she found papers in Brent's home office that she didn't recognize. Drafts of things. She said he was hovering. Kennedy. Always hovering. Every time a nurse came in. Every time she tried to make a phone call. He was there, holding her hand, playing the saint. But she said it felt like he was guarding her. "Why didn't she tell me?" I asked. The guilt hitting me fresh. "She didn't want you to worry." Marla said. "You were working so hard in the city. She wanted to protect you, and I think she was afraid she was being paranoid. The chemo brain, the meds. Brent was so charming to everyone else. She thought maybe she was losing her mind." "She wasn't," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the silver key. "She hid this for a reason." Marla reached out and touched the key. "You need a lawyer. Kennedy. A real one. Not the family friend Brent uses. You need someone who eats sharks for breakfast." "I don't have shark money," I admitted. "Brent cut me off from the estate accounts. I am running on savings." "Then get a piranha," Marla said. "Go see Tessa Linford. She handled my divorce when my ex tried to hide his pension in a shell company. Her office is behind the dry cleaner on 4th Street. She is cheap, she is messy, and she hates bullies." I took the advice. I drank the tea, hugged Marla until my ribs hurt, and drove straight to 4th Street. Tessa Linford's office was exactly as Marla described, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a vape shop, with a faded sign that simply read Linford Law, Probate Family. Inside, it looked less like a law firm and more like a paper factory explosion. Files were stacked in teetering towers on every surface. Tessa herself was a tiny woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and glasses on a chain. She was eating a sandwich with one hand and typing with the other when I walked in. "I don't have an appointment." I started. "Sit," she said, not looking up. "Move the boxes. If you are selling insurance, leave. If you are getting divorced, I have a waiting list. If someone died, start talking." "Someone died," I said, moving a box labeled Patterson Estate to the floor, "and someone is stealing the house." Tessa stopped typing. She put the sandwich down and swiveled her chair to face me. "Stealing the house, or just inheriting it when you wish they hadn't?" she asked. "There is a big difference." I explained the timeline, the death 3 months ago, the sudden deed transfer recorded weeks later, the missing will, the eviction notice, the listing with Northlake Realty, the closing scheduled for 9 days from now. Tessa listened, her eyes narrowing behind her lenses. When I mentioned the closing date, she let out a low whistle. 9 days? She asked. "That is fast. That is cash buyer. No inspection fast." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "You said there is no probate case open?" I checked the county site. I said, "I saw the deed transfer, but I didn't see a probate file number attached to it. It just referenced a last will and testament of Eleanor Hale." Tessa frowned. "If there is a will, it has to be probated to transfer the deed. Unless the house was in joint tenancy or a trust, was Brent on the deed before she died? No. I said, she bought it before they met. It was in her name only. Then he can't just transfer it, Tessa said, tapping her pen on the desk. He would need to be the executor, and he would need letters testamentary from the court. If you didn't see a probate file, then he bypassed the court. How? I asked. Affidavit of heirship? Maybe? Tessa mused. Or he forged a deed that claims he was added years ago and just recorded it late. But you said the recording date was recent? Yes, 3 weeks ago. Tessa stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, kicking a stack of papers out of her way. This smells, she said. It smells like a frantic cash out. If he is closing in 9 days, he is running from something. People who are grieving take their time. People who are guilty run sprints. She turned back to me. Here is the reality. Kennedy, we are behind. If the closing is next Friday, we need to throw a wrench in the gears immediately. I can file an emergency petition to stay the sale. But I need grounds. I can't just say the stepdaughter is sad. I need evidence of fraud, incapacity, or procedural error. I have a key to a lockbox I can't open, I said, feeling the weight of it in my pocket. And a neighbor who thinks Brent is sketchy. Tessa nodded. Keep the key. We will subpoena the bank records eventually. For now, I need you to go back to that house and be a sponge. Watch him. Don't fight him. Don't scream at him. Let him think he has won. People get sloppy when they think they have won. Find me a document, a witness, anything that proves he was moving assets before he had the legal right to do so. She handed me a retainer agreement. My rate is $200 an hour. I will cap the initial filing at $1,500. Can you do that? I nodded. It was a chunk of my savings, but I would pay double to wipe the smug look off Brent's face. I signed the paper. Go home, Tessa said, and lock your door. When I pulled into the driveway, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. The U-Haul was gone. Panic flared in my chest. Had he done it? Had he emptied the house while I was gone? I unlocked the front door and stepped in. The air was still. The furniture in the living room was still there. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then I smelled it. Fresh coffee. Kennedy? Brent's voice came from the kitchen. He walked out, holding 2 mugs. He wasn't wearing his aggressive landlord face today. He looked tired. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked like the man my mother had married 5 years ago, the charming, slightly rugged contractor who made her laugh. I made coffee, he said, offering me one of the mugs. Peace offering. I hesitated, then took the mug. It was warm. I didn't drink it. I am sorry about this morning, he said, running a hand through his hair. I lost my temper. It has been a nightmare. Kennedy, losing her, the paperwork, the bills. I'm not trying to be the villain here. He motioned to the sofa. I sat on the edge of the cushion, keeping my spine rigid. You are evicting me. Brent, that feels pretty villainous. He sighed, sitting in the armchair opposite me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking earnestly into my eyes. I am drowning. Kennedy, that is the truth. The medical bills. They are astronomical. The insurance denied the last round of experimental treatments. I owe the hospital over $80,000. $80,000? I repeated. Mom had excellent insurance, and she had savings. It wasn't enough, he said, shaking his head. And the business. I let my contracting work slide while I was taking care of her. I have vendors calling me, threatening to sue. If I don't sell this house, I am going to lose everything. I am doing this to save us from bankruptcy. I just need to close this chapter so I can breathe again. He looked pitiful. For a second, a fraction of a second, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was just a desperate man trying to stay afloat. But then he continued, the buyers are offering $450,000. Cash. That clears the debt. Gives me a small cushion to start over in an apartment. I am not getting rich here. I froze. $450,000? The market value of this house was closer to $600. He was selling it for $150,000 under market value. Why so low? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The house is worth more. Quick sale, he said, waving his hand dismissively. Market is softening. Plus, the roof needs work. It is a fair price for a cash deal. He was lying. The roof was 3 years old. I knew because I had helped my mother pick out the shingles. He wasn't drowning in medical debt. He was dumping the asset. He was liquidating it for fast cash before anyone could look too closely at the title. I took a sip of the coffee to hide my expression. It was bitter. I understand. I lied. It is just a lot to process. Take your time packing, he said, his voice softening. You don't have to be out in 10 days. I can stall them a little. Take 2 weeks. Just don't fight the sale. Kennedy, please, for her sake. For her sake. I stood up. I'm going to take a nap. I said, I have a headache. He nodded, looking relieved. Sleep well. I walked upstairs, my heart pounding. $80,000 in debt? My mother would never have let bills pile up like that. She was the woman who paid her credit card the day the statement arrived. I went into my room and locked the door. I didn't nap. I opened my laptop. I needed to see the communications. My mother's email password had been the same for 10 years. The name of our first dog plus the year I was born. Buster, 1993. I logged into her Gmail account. Brent hadn't changed it yet. Sloppy. I scrolled through the inbox. Most of it was junk mail. Condolences from distant relatives, and billing notifications. I searched for Pinecrest title. One thread popped up. Subject, Escrow 4492-1402 Sycamore Street. Docs needed. The date was 3 days ago. I opened it. Dear Eleanor, please see the attached affidavit for signature. We need this returned by Friday to clear the title defect. Best, Sarah. I stared at the screen. Dear Eleanor, my mother was dead. Why was the title company emailing her as if she were alive? I scrolled down. There was a reply. Sent from my mother's account yesterday morning. Hi, Sarah. Attached is the signed document. Let me know if you need anything else. Thanks. Eleanor. I stopped breathing. Eleanor. My mother's name was Eleanor. She had been an English teacher for 30 years. She would never, ever typo her own name, and she certainly wouldn't do it on a legal document. Brent was accessing her email. He was impersonating her to the title company. He was pretending she was still part of the process, or backdating the conversation to make it look like she had initiated the sale before she died. I took a screenshot, then another. I forwarded the entire thread to a new, secure email address I created right then. This was fraud. Not just civil dispute fraud. This was wire fraud. I closed the laptop and sat back. I needed fresh air. I felt suffocated in the house with him downstairs. I slipped out the back door again, careful to be quiet. I walked to the property line where the hedges separated our yard from the Dempseys. Harold Dempsey was out back, tinkering with his lawnmower. He was a retired mechanic, the kind of neighbor who noticed everything but rarely spoke. Mr. Dempsey, I called out softly. He looked up, wiping grease on a rag. Kennedy, he said, nodding. Sorry about your mom. Fine woman. Thank you. I said. I walked closer to the hedge. Can I ask you something weird? Ask away. Have you seen anyone unusual around the house lately? Besides Brent? Harold squinted, chewing on his lip. Well, he said slowly, about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, right after the services, I saw Brent in the driveway. He was meeting a fella, big guy, suit that didn't fit right, driving a black sedan. What were they doing? Standing by the garage. Brent looked nervous. He was handing the guy a folder, thick one. I remember it because it fell open when Brent passed it over. Did you see what was inside? Harold scratched his chin. Not the papers, but the folder. It had writing on the front, big black marker. Said, Notary Journal, or something like that. Notary Journal. My stomach dropped. A notary journal was the official record of every signature a notary witnessed. It was supposed to stay with the notary. Why would Brent be handing one to a stranger in a driveway? Unless he was buying it, or renting it, or paying someone to doctor it. Did the man take it? I asked. Yeah, took it, shook Brent's hand, and drove off. Fast. Thank you. Harold, I said, you have no idea how helpful that is. I walked back toward the street, my mind racing. Brent was manufacturing the past. He was backdating signatures. That was why the deed was recorded weeks after the death. He had to find someone willing to stamp it with a date from when she was still alive. I needed to find that notary. There were only 5 notary publics in Marlow Ridge. I got in my car and started driving. The first 3 were dead ends, routine shipping stores and bank branches that had no record of Brent Hale. The 4th was a small insurance office on the edge of town. The woman behind the desk, a stern lady named Mrs. Higgins, looked up when I walked in. I am looking for information about a notarization for Brent Hale. I said. She made a face. Him again? Again? I pressed. He was here last month. She said, adjusting her glasses. Came in asking hypothetical questions. Wanted to know if I could notarize a document as of a previous date if he could prove the person meant to sign it but got sick. What did you tell him? I told him that is a felony and to get out of my office. Mrs. Higgins said indignantly, we stamped the date we witness. Period. He was shopping for a dirty notary, and based on Harold's story, he found one. I thanked Mrs. Higgins and sat in my car, calling Tessa immediately. Tessa, I said when she picked up. He asked a notary to backdate a signature. I have a witness, and I have a neighbor who saw him handing off a notary journal to a man in a suit. That is it, Tessa said, her voice crackling with energy. That is the wedge. If we can prove the notary record is falsified, the deed is void, the sale stops. What do I do? I am drafting the emergency petition now. Tessa said, I will include an affidavit for your neighbor, but we need to know who the actual notary on the deed is. Can you get a copy of the deed? The one recorded at the county? I can download it. I said, get the name of the notary from the stamp. We need to find that guy. If we break him, Brent falls. I will get it. I said, one more thing, Tessa added. I ran a deeper title search. There is something else. What? A new lien was recorded on the house last week. $10,000. $10,000? That is small for a lien. It is a mechanic's lien, Tessa said. But here is the kicker. It is from a company called Hale Construction. That is Brent's company. I said, exactly. He filed a lien against his own dying wife's house, claiming unpaid renovation work, and then satisfied it immediately with a private loan from a hard money lender. Why would he do that? To get cash quick. Tessa explained. He used the house as collateral for a high-interest loan before the sale even closed. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter is a loan shark. He is desperate. Kennedy, be careful. I hung up. Desperate men were dangerous men. I drove home, the twilight turning to night. I needed that deed. I needed the notary's name. I parked and walked up the steps. The house was dark. Brent must have gone out. I unlocked the front door and went straight to the stairs. I needed to print the documents from my laptop and get them to Tessa. I reached for my bedroom doorknob. It didn't turn. It was locked. I always locked it, but the key didn't slide in smoothly. It felt gritty. I jiggled it. The door swung open. The wood around the latch was splintered. Someone had forced it. I froze on the threshold. My room had been tossed. Drawers were pulled out. My clothes were scattered on the floor. The mattress was askew, and my desk was empty. My laptop, gone. My backup hard drive, gone. Even the notepad where I had written Tessa's number, gone. The violation hit me like a physical blow. He had been in here. He had touched my things. I turned around and ran down the hall to his office. The guest room, he had claimed. The door was open. I walked in. It was neat, organized, but on the desk, sitting next to his old computer, was a brand new piece of equipment. A high-resolution scanner and laser printer. The power light was blinking green. Next to it was a stack of paper, thick, cream-colored paper, the kind used for legal documents, and a practice sheet. I picked it up. It was covered in signatures. Eleanor Hale, Eleanor Hale, Eleanor Hale. Some were shaky, some were smooth, He was practicing. He wasn't just finding a dirty notary. He was doing the forgery himself. I heard the front door open downstairs. "Kennedy?" Brent's voice boomed up the stairs. "You home?" I dropped the paper. He was here. I looked around the room. There was nowhere to hide. I walked out of the office and met him in the hallway. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, holding a pizza box. He looked up, smiling. "Hey, thought we could do pizza tonight. Like old times." "You broke into my room," I said, my voice trembling with rage. His smile didn't falter. "I don't know what you are talking about. My laptop is gone. The door is busted. Must have been a break-in," he said calmly. "Shady neighborhood these days. You should be more careful with your valuables." He took a bite of a slice of pepperoni, chewing slowly. "By the way," he said, his mouth full, "I wouldn't go looking for trouble. Kennedy, you might find things you don't want to see." He was threatening me. I looked at the scanner in his office, then back at him. "I am not hungry," I said. I walked past him, down the stairs, and out the front door. I didn't have my laptop. I didn't have my notes, but I had the name I had seen on the practice sheet, scrawled in the corner in a different handwriting, Gavin Rail. It wasn't a signature. It was a name. I got in my car and locked the doors. I pulled out my phone and texted Tessa. "He stole my laptop. He is forging the signatures himself, and I have a name, Gavin Rail." I looked back at the house. Brent was standing in the window, watching me. He raised the pizza slice in a mock toast. He thought he had disarmed me. He was wrong. He had just given me the target. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I was going hunting. The fluorescent lights of the county probate court hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz that seemed to vibrate right through the wooden benches. It was 8:30 in the morning. 2 days after Brent had raided my room and stolen my laptop, I sat next to Tessa Linford. My hands clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Tessa looked like she had slept in her suit, which, knowing her, was entirely possible. She was shuffling a stack of papers that represented my entire defense: the affidavit from my neighbor Harold about the notary journal, the screenshots of the forged emails I had managed to save to the cloud, and the police report I had filed regarding the theft of my computer. "We are next," Tessa whispered, leaning close. "Now, listen, this is an emergency motion, but we are asking a judge to halt a sale based on suspicion, not a smoking gun. The burden of proof is high. Let me do the talking." I nodded. I felt nauseous. The clerk called our case number. We walked up to the high wooden counter. The judge wasn't even there. It was a hearing officer, a tired-looking woman named Magistrate Cohen who looked like she had seen every variety of family dysfunction the state of Pennsylvania had to offer. Tessa launched into her argument. She was sharp, concise, painting a picture of a hasty, fraudulent transfer and a stepdaughter being steamrolled. She brought up the lien, the lack of a probate file, and the suspicious timing of the deed recording. Magistrate Cohen listened, her face impassive. She leafed through the motion. "Ms. Linford," she said, her voice dry. "I see a lot of allegations here: forgery, theft, elder abuse, but I do not see a probate case number for the decedent because the respondent has not filed one." Tessa argued. "He bypassed the court to sell the asset. That is the point. Your Honor, he is acting as an executor without authority." The magistrate sighed and took off her reading glasses. "If there is no case open, I have limited jurisdiction to issue an injunction today. I can open a file. I can set a hearing, but the docket is full until next month." "Next month?" I blurted out. "The closing is in 7 days." The magistrate looked at me, not unkindly, but with the weary patience of a bureaucrat. "I understand your urgency, Ms. Wood, but you are asking me to freeze a property transfer based on an affidavit from a neighbor and a hunch. If Mr. Hale is the legal owner on the deed, which, according to the records, he currently is, I cannot strip his rights without due process. We need a temporary restraining order," Tessa insisted, "just until we can verify the signature on the deed." The magistrate stamped a paper. "I will grant you a citation requiring Mr. Hale to appear and show cause. But I cannot sign an ex parte order stopping the sale today. I need to hear from him. I will schedule the hearing for—" She checked her calendar. "The 28th. "The 28th, I said, my voice hollow. "That is 3 days after the closing. "That is the best I can do," the magistrate said. "Next case." We walked out of the courtroom into the busy hallway. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "So that is it?" I asked, stopping in the middle of the corridor. "He sells the house, takes the cash, and leaves town before the hearing?" Tessa grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the flow of foot traffic. "No, that is not it. This is just the first layer of the onion. The court moves at the speed of law. Fraud moves at the speed of cash. We have to slow him down from the outside. How? We build the evidence he is afraid of." Tessa said. "The magistrate didn't stop him, but she gave us a citation. That means he has to answer eventually. But to stop the closing next week, we need to make the title company too terrified to issue a policy." She checked her watch. "You have the key to the safe deposit box. I am going to take this citation back to the judge's chambers and badger the clerk until they give me a limited order to access that box for inventory purposes. It is a long shot, but if I frame it as preserving potential estate assets, I might get it by this afternoon." "What do I do?" I asked. "You investigate," she said. "The deed transfer relies on a document signed, theoretically, by your mother. Find out where she was that day. If we can prove she physically couldn't have signed it, the title company will fold." I nodded. I had a mission. I left the courthouse and got into my car. The timeline. I needed to reconstruct the timeline. I pulled up the photo I had taken of the new will Brent had flashed at me during our first argument. Just a glimpse. But I remembered the date he claimed it was executed. March 15th. March 15th. I drove to the oncology center where my mother had spent most of her last year. It was a modern glass building that looked more like a tech campus than a place where people went to fight for their lives. The automatic doors whooshed open, and the smell of antiseptic hand sanitizer hit me, triggering a wave of grief so sharp I had to stop and breathe. I walked to the reception desk. The woman behind the computer was new, but the head nurse, a woman named Brenda, was walking by with a chart. She stopped when she saw me. "Kennedy?" she asked, her expression softening. "Oh, honey, how are you doing?" "I am hanging in there." "Brenda," I lied. She came around the desk and gave me a careful hug. "I miss her," Brenda said. "She was a fighter. I need a favor." "Brenda," I said, keeping my voice low, "I am trying to settle some insurance disputes, and I need to confirm the dates she was here for treatment in March. Specifically the week of the 15th. Brenda frowned. "You know I can't print the official records without a HIPAA release from the executor. And Brent hasn't sent that over yet." "I know." I said, "I don't need the medical details, just the dates. Please, Brenda. It is important. Brent is confused about the timeline, and I need to make sure the billing is right." Brenda looked at me, then at the computer screen. She typed in my mother's name. She scrolled down, her eyes scanning the rows of data. "March," she muttered. "Here we go. Oh, yes. That was a bad week. Was she here on the 15th? I asked. Brenda nodded. "She was here all day." "Kennedy. That was the day we started the third-line heavy infusion. She checked in at 8 in the morning and didn't discharge until 6:30 in the evening. And her condition?" I asked. "Was she lucid?" Brenda sighed. "Kennedy. With the pre-meds we give for that protocol, the Benadryl, the steroids, the Ativan, most patients sleep through the whole thing. She would have been very groggy. Honestly, she probably wouldn't have known what day of the week it was. I felt a surge of adrenaline. So if someone said she signed a complex legal document that afternoon, in front of a notary?" Brenda shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. We don't even let patients drive themselves home after that treatment. She couldn't have focused on a menu, let alone a contract, and no visitors were logged that day except you and Brent." "Thank you." "Brenda," I said, my voice trembling, "you have no idea how much that helps." I walked out of the cancer center into the bright sunlight. March 15th. She was heavily sedated, She was fighting for her life. She was not signing a will that disinherited her daughter. Brent had forged it, or he had guided her hand while she was high on Ativan. Either way, it was invalid. I got in my car and drove toward Pinecrest Title Escrow. It was time to rattle the cage. Pinecrest Title was located in a generic office park on the north side of town. The lobby was decorated in aggressive beige, with a fake ficus tree in the corner and a bowl of mints on the reception desk. I walked up to the receptionist, a young woman who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. "Hi," I said. "I am Kennedy Wood. I am here regarding the closing for 1402 Sycamore Street, file number 4492. She typed the number in. "I am sorry. Ms. Wood, you are not listed as a party to this transaction. I can't give you any information." "I know," I said, placing my hands on the desk. "I am the daughter of the deceased owner, and I have information that the escrow officer needs to see immediately." The receptionist looked bored. "You can leave a note. It is about a fraudulent lien and a missing probate filing," I said, raising my voice just enough to carry. "And if the closing proceeds, the title insurance policy will be void." The typing in the back office stopped. A woman appeared from a cubicle behind the glass partition. She was in her 40s, wearing a sensible cardigan and holding a file. She looked at me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "I am the title examiner," she said. "Come with me." She led me into a small conference room and closed the door. She didn't offer me a seat. "You are Eleanor Hale's daughter?" she asked. "Yes. And what is this about a missing probate?" "There is no probate case," I said. "Brent Hale is selling the house based on a deed transfer that happened 3 weeks ago. A transfer that relies on a will signed on a day my mother was comatose in a chemotherapy chair." The examiner's face didn't move, but her eyes flickered. "We rely on the documents recorded with the county," she said stiffly. "The deed is recorded." "I know," I said, "and I also know there is a mechanics lien from Hale Construction for $10,000. A lien filed by the seller against his own property to secure a private loan." The examiner stiffened. "How do you know about the lien?" "Because I am paying attention." I said, "Look, I am not trying to be difficult. I am trying to save you from a lawsuit. If you close this deal, you are insuring a stolen house. The buyers will sue you. I will sue you." The examiner looked at the file in her hands. She tapped her finger against the cover. "I can't discuss the details of the transaction with you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It violates privacy regulations." She looked at the door, then back at me. "But if there is a claim of ownership, or a defect in the chain of title, we take that very seriously." She leaned forward. "The closing is Friday at 10 o'clock. If you have a court order, or proof of a competing claim, you should bring it." She wasn't stonewalling me anymore. She was inviting me. "You should come to the closing," she repeated, emphasizing the words. I understood. She couldn't stop the sale on hearsay. But if I showed up and created a cloud on title right at the table, she would have to pause. "I will be there," I said. I left the office feeling a strange mix of fear and power. I had a target. Friday at 10. I checked my phone as I walked to the car. 3 missed texts. One from my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister who lived in Florida and hadn't visited in 5 years. "Kennedy. Brent called me. He is devastated. Why are you doing this? He is trying to follow Eleanor's wishes. Please stop being cruel." Another from my cousin Mike. "Heard you are trying to sue Brent? Not cool. Ken, the guy is grieving. Let it go." And a third from a number I didn't save, but recognized as Brent's sister. "You are unstable. Get help." My face burned. He was working the phones. He was painting me as the hysterical, greedy stepchild, while he played the martyr. He knew exactly which buttons to push with my family. They were distant, conflict-averse, and easily swayed by a man who could cry on cue. I wanted to text back. I wanted to scream, "He is stealing everything!" But I didn't. Engaging would only make me look crazier. Then, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I didn't recognize the number. It was local. I lifted the phone to my ear and played the message. The voice was male, smooth, calm, not Brent. "Ms. Wood, you are asking a lot of questions around town. Notaries, doctors. It is becoming disruptive. A pause. The silence on the line was heavy. You don't understand what you are interfering with. This isn't just about a house. Walk away. Kennedy, while you still have a choice, the line clicked dead. I stood frozen in the parking lot, the summer heat feeling suddenly cold on my skin. This isn't just about a house. Who was that? The man Harold saw? Gavin Rail? It wasn't a direct threat of violence, but the certainty in his voice was terrifying. It sounded corporate. It sounded organized. My phone rang again. I jumped, nearly dropping it. It was Tessa. I got it, she said, her voice breathless. I badgered the clerk until she cried, but I got the order. Limited access to the safe deposit box for the purpose of inventorying estate assets. Meet me at the bank in 20 minutes. I drove like a maniac. When I got to Ridgeway Community Bank, Tessa was waiting by the door, waving a piece of paper with a raised seal. This is a one-shot deal, she warned as we walked in. We go in. We list the contents. We take photos. We cannot remove anything yet. But once we know what is in there, we can file for a specific retrieval order. We walked to the desk. The same teller was there. She looked at the court order, then at me, then at Tessa. She didn't argue this time. Follow me, she said. We went into the vault. The air was cool and smelled of old dust and money. The teller used her master key, and I inserted the silver key from the lockbox. The door swung open. I pulled out the long metal box and carried it to the private viewing room. Tessa closed the door. Okay, she said. Open it. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside, it wasn't jewelry or cash. It was paperwork. 2 thick, manila folders. The first one was labeled in my mother's handwriting. Estate plan, updated. The second one was labeled in red ink. If Brent tries anything, Tessa gasped. Well, that is specific, she murmured. I opened the first folder. It was a document titled, The Eleanor Hale Revocable Living Trust. I scanned the first page. It was dated 5 years ago. I, Eleanor Hale, hereby transfer all assets, real and personal, into this trust. I flipped to the schedule of assets. There it was, 1402 Sycamore Street, Marlow Ridge, Pennsylvania, and the beneficiaries? Primary beneficiary, Kennedy Wood. Successor trustee, Kennedy Wood. I stared at the paper. She didn't leave the house to him. She didn't even leave it to her estate. She put it in a trust. If this trust is valid, Tessa said, reading over my shoulder, then the house wasn't hers to die with. It belonged to the trust, which means Brent couldn't inherit it through a will. I finished, because she didn't own it personally anymore. The trust owned it. Exactly, Tessa said. And if he transferred the deed from her estate, he transferred property the estate didn't own. The deed is void. The sale is illegal. I opened the second folder. If Brent tries anything. Inside was a single envelope, sealed with tape. Kennedy was written on the front. Read this only if necessary. I tore it open. A single sheet of lined paper, covered in her familiar script. Kennedy, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears came true. I love Brent, but I know he's in trouble. He has debts he hasn't told me about. People he owes money to. I found a loan agreement in his truck last year. He borrowed money from private lenders to keep his business afloat. High interest, dangerous people. I created the trust to protect the house from his creditors. He knows the house is supposed to go to you. He agreed to it. But desperation makes people do terrible things. If he tries to sell the house, you have the power to stop him. You are the trustee. But please, Kennedy, be careful. If he is selling, it means he is cornered. Do not confront him alone. I love you. Mom. I lowered the letter, tears blurring my vision. She knew. She knew the whole time. She stayed with him. She loved him. But she didn't trust him. She built a fortress of paper to protect me, and she hid the key where only I would find it. He is in debt to loan sharks, I whispered. That is what this is. The mechanic's lien isn't a renovation debt. It is a marker. He owes dangerous people, and the house is the only way out. Tessa took the letter from my hand and read it. Her face went pale. Kennedy, she said seriously, this changes the calculus. We aren't just fighting a greedy stepdad. We are fighting a man who is terrified for his life. That voicemail you got? That wasn't a lawyer. That was a lender. She started taking photos of every page with her phone. We have the smoking gun. She said, this trust proves he has no authority to sell. The house is yours. It has been yours for 5 years. She looked at me. But we have to be smart. If we file this in court tomorrow, he might run, or he might do something desperate. We have to stop the closing. I said, that is the leverage. If the money stops, he has to deal with me. Tessa nodded. We are going to that closing, and we are going to drop this trust on the table like a nuclear bomb. We put the folders back in the box. We couldn't take the originals yet. The court order was only for inventory. But we had the photos. We had the proof. We walked out of the bank. The sun was blinding. I felt different. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the trustee. I was the legal owner of the house on Sycamore Street. Brent was squatting in my house. He was selling my property. I got into my car. The fear was still there, buzzing in the background. Do not confront him alone. But the anger was stronger. I drove home. I had to pack a bag. I wasn't going to stay in the house with him tonight, not after reading that letter. But as I pulled onto Sycamore Street, I saw a black sedan parked across from the house. Tinted windows. Idling. The voicemail. You don't understand what you are interfering with. I didn't turn into the driveway. I kept driving. My heart hammering. I checked into a Motel 6 on the highway. I lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the photo of the trust document on my phone. 7 days. I had the truth. Now I just had to survive until the closing. The air in the Motel 6 smelled of lemon polish and stale cigarettes, a scent that would forever remind me of the moment I decided to go to war. I sat at the wobbly particle board desk, the photos of my mother's trust document glowing on my phone screen like radioactive proof. Tessa Linford sat on the edge of the bed. Her heels kicked off, a legal pad balanced on her knees. She was outlining the battlefield, and the map looked grim. Here is the hard reality. Kennedy, she said, tapping the end of her pen against her chin. We have the nuclear option. The trust proves the house wasn't your mother's to give away in a will, which means Brent's authority is a ghost, but the law is a slow machine, and a closing is a fast transaction. She held up 3 fingers. We have 3 choices. Option A. We file for a temporary restraining order. It is the cleanest legal move, but without a judge available until the 28th. We are gambling on an emergency magistrate who might just shrug and say it is a monetary dispute. If we lose the motion, Brent gets a court order saying he can proceed, and we are dead in the water. She folded 1 finger down. Option B. We bypass the court and go straight to the money. We notify Pinecrest Title and the buyer's agent. We send them the trust. We scream fraud. The title company is risk-averse. If they sniff a lawsuit, they might pull the insurance. But if we do that, we tip our hand to Brent. He might pivot, find a shady private lender, and try to sell it off-market before we can stop him. And option C? I asked. We do both. Tessa said. We file the motion to get it on the record, and we carpet bomb the title company with evidence. It risks escalation. It backs Brent into a corner. And a cornered man who's already forging signatures is a dangerous man. I looked at the phone. I looked at the date. 5 days. We do both. I said, I am not betting on a magistrate's mood. I want the title company to be too terrified to print a check. Tessa nodded, a grim smile touching her lips. Good choice. I will start drafting the injunction. You draft the notice to the title company. Make it cold. Kennedy, make it sound like it was written by an auditor, not a grieving daughter. I opened a new email on my phone. My thumbs hovered over the glass. To closing Pinecrest Title. Com. Legal Pinecrest Title. Com. Subject. Notice of competing claim. Escrow 4492, 1402 Sycamore Street. I typed steadily. My consultant training taking over. I didn't use emotional language. I cited the trust date. I cited the specific clause that named me successor trustee. I attached the photos of the signature pages. Any transfer of title regarding the above-referenced property without the express written consent of the trustee is void and will be pursued as a fraudulent conveyance. Proceed at your own peril. I hit send. It felt like pulling a trigger. Now, Tessa said, standing up and sliding her feet back into her heels. You need to stay away from him. Stay here, or go to a friend's house. Do not go back to Sycamore Street. I have to. I said, Kennedy, read the letter your mother left. She said specifically, I know what she said. I interrupted, but my suit for the closing is in that closet. My files from the last 3 years are in the basement, and if I disappear, he wins the psychological game. I need to show him I am not afraid. Tessa looked at me, her expression halfway between admiration and frustration. If you go back there, you lock your door, you keep your phone in your hand, and if he so much as raises his voice, you call 911. I promise. I didn't tell her the real reason I was going back. I was going back because I needed to know why. The letter mentioned debts. It mentioned dangerous people. If I was going to blow up this sale, I needed to know exactly how big the explosion was going to be. The house was quiet when I returned. Brent's car was in the driveway, but the curtains were drawn. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It felt different now that I knew the truth about the trust. I wasn't a guest in his house. He was a trespasser in mine. I walked toward the stairs. My keys clutched between my knuckles like a brass knuckle. Kennedy, I stopped. Brent was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. He was holding a glass of scotch, the amber liquid catching the dim light. He wasn't smiling today. He wasn't wearing the cardigan. He was in a stained t-shirt, and he looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. You are back, he said. His voice was thick. I live here. Brent. He laughed. A dry, humorless sound. For a few more days. Maybe. I saw the email. My heart hammered against my ribs. Pinecrest must have called him immediately. I don't know what you're talking about. I lied, keeping my face impassive. Don't play dumb. Kennedy, the title officer called me. Said you sent over some paperwork. Claimed there is a trust? There is a trust. I said, turning to face him fully. I have the documents. Mom left the house to me. Brent, years ago. He took a step toward me, then another. He moved with a heavy, predatory grace that I had never seen before. That trust was revoked, he said, his voice low. She changed her mind. She wanted me to have it. She knew I needed it. She knew you were in debt. I shot back. She knew you were borrowing money from people who break legs for a living. That is why she protected the house. Brent stopped. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. You went through my things, he whispered. No, I went through hers. She left a letter. Brent. She told me everything. He set the glass down on the hallway table with a hard clack. You don't understand, he said. You think you are playing detective? You think this is some game where you find the clue and win the prize? He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. Before I could back up, he had me pinned against the banister. He didn't hit me. He just leaned in, his face inches from mine, smelling of stale alcohol and fear. I am not doing this because I am greedy. Kennedy, I am doing this because I have no choice. If this sale doesn't close on Friday, the house won't be yours anyway. It will be seized, and I will be gone. You don't get to ruin this, he hissed, a spray of spittle hitting my cheek. You don't get to destroy my life just because you want a trophy from your mommy. Get away from me, I said, my voice shaking but loud. He grabbed my upper arm. His grip was bruising. You withdraw that claim, he said. You call Pinecrest and tell them you made a mistake. You tell them the trust was dissolved, or what? Or I will make sure you regret it. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of knuckles on the front door was like a gunshot in the tense hallway. Brent froze. He looked at the door, then back at me. For 1 second, His eyes were pure, unadulterated rage. Then, the mask slid back into place. It was terrifying to watch. The tension left his shoulders. The snarl smoothed into a weary frown. He let go of my arm and stepped back, smoothing his hair. He walked to the door and opened it. "Mrs. Higgins?" he asked. His voice filled with a polite, confused warmth. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, holding a Tupperware container. "Hi, Brent," she chirped. "I just wanted to drop off some lasagna. I saw Kennedy's car pull in and thought you two might not feel like cooking." "Oh, that is so kind of you," Brent said, taking the container. "We were just discussing the packing. It is an emotional time." He turned to look at me. "Isn't it, Kennedy?" I stood by the stairs, rubbing my throbbing arm. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show Mrs. Higgins the fingerprints forming on my skin. But I saw the look in Brent's eyes. A warning. Make a scene, and see what happens. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Very emotional. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins." Brent closed the door and turned back to me. The mask didn't slip again, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. "Call the title company," he said softly. "Fix this." He picked up his scotch and walked into the living room. I ran up the stairs, locked my bedroom door, and shoved the dresser in front of it. I sat on the floor, shaking. He was right about one thing. He was desperate, and he had just confirmed the debt. I needed to find out who he owed, because if I stopped the sale, those people weren't going to just go away. They might come for the house, or for me. I waited until I heard the television go on downstairs. Then I opened my laptop, my old backup laptop I had retrieved from the closet. It was slow, but it worked. I started searching. Hale Construction. Liens. Judgments. I found the small stuff first, unpaid lumber bills, a dispute with a subcontractor, then I went deeper. I searched the county court records for civil filings against Brent personally. Nothing recent. I tried the federal bankruptcy court. Nothing. Then I remembered the mechanics lien Tessa had found. Hale Construction filing against the house. I looked up the release of that lien. It had been paid off 2 weeks ago. But who paid it? I dug into the document details. The release was notarized by a man named Gavin Rail. The same name from the practice sheet. The same name Harold had seen. I searched Gavin Rail. He didn't have a LinkedIn. He didn't have a Facebook. But his name popped up in a PDF from a court case 3 years ago in New Jersey. State versus Rail. It was a racketeering case involving construction kickbacks and shadow banking. Gavin Rail wasn't a banker. He was a fixer. He worked for private capital groups that operated in the gray zones, lending cash to contractors who couldn't get bank loans. At interest rates that were criminal, enforced by men who didn't send letters, Brent had borrowed from these people to cover his business losses. He had probably forged invoices to show he had revenue coming in, using my mother's house as the asset on his balance sheet. Now the loan was due, and if he didn't pay, they wouldn't sue him. They would expose the fraud. Falsified invoices, wire fraud, that was the leverage. Criminal exposure. My phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting Tessa or another threat from Brent. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice guarded. "Ms. Wood?" The voice was female, professional, but anxious. "This is Jennifer Sallow. I am the agent for the buyers. The Millers." I sat up straighter. "I shouldn't be calling you," Jennifer said, her voice dropping. "My broker would kill me, but Pinecrest Title just flagged the file. They said there is a potential adverse claim, and they are pausing the clear to close." "Good." I said, "They should—" "Ms. Wood." Jennifer sighed. "The Millers are a young couple. She is pregnant. They have already given notice on their apartment. They are supposed to move in on Saturday. They are terrified. They were told this was a clean estate sale. It is not clean." "Jennifer," I said, "it is a crime scene." She was silent for a moment. "Is it true?" she asked. "About the trust?" "Yes, I have the documents. My stepfather has no right to sell this house." "Okay." She said, "Okay, look, I have a duty to my clients. If the title isn't clear, I have to tell them to walk. But they love this house. They are devastated." I felt a pang of guilt. These people were innocent. They were just casualties of Brent's mess. "Jennifer, listen to me." I said, "I don't want to hurt your clients, but if they buy this house on Friday, they are buying a lawsuit. They will lose the house eventually. I will not stop fighting for it." "I understand," she said. "If you want to help them," I continued, "tell them to ask for a holdback. Tell them to demand that the proceeds of the sale be held in escrow until the title issue is resolved." "Brent won't agree to that," Jennifer said. "He has been pushing for a disbursement at the table. He was very specific. He needs the wire to hit immediately." "Of course he does." I thought, Gavin Rell is waiting for his money. If he refuses to hold the money, I said, "That tells your clients everything they need to know." "Thank you, Kennedy," Jennifer said. "I am going to have a hard conversation with them tonight." I hung up. A new ally. If the buyers got cold feet, or if they made demands Brent couldn't meet, the deal would crumble from the inside. I went back to the computer. I felt like I was pulling a thread that was unraveling the entire world. I decided to run one more search. My mother's name, Eleanor Hale. But this time, I didn't search in Pennsylvania. The letter had mentioned if Brent tries anything, it implied a pattern. I searched New York records. We used to go to a lake in upstate New York when I was a kid. Hollow Fern. We rented a cabin there every summer. My mother had always talked about buying a place there one day. A room of one's own, she called it. I searched property records in Hollow Fern. New York. My breath hitched. Owner, Eleanor Hale. Property, 22 Lakeside Drive. She had bought it 3 years ago. She never told me. Maybe it was her secret escape plan. I clicked on the history. Deed transfer. Date, 4 months ago. Grantor, Eleanor Hale. Grantee, Brent Hale. 4 months ago. That was 1 month before she died. I clicked the document image. The signature, Eleanor Hale. It was shaky, weak, but the date. I checked my calendar from 4 months ago. That was the week she was in the ICU with pneumonia. I was with her every single day. She couldn't lift a spoon, let alone sign a deed in New York. And the notary? Gavin Rell, notarized in New York? But Gavin Rell wasn't a New York notary. The stamp looked off. I zoomed in. It was a Pennsylvania stamp. He had notarized a New York deed with a Pennsylvania stamp, claiming she appeared before him in Pennsylvania on a day she was in a hospital bed. This wasn't just about the house on Sycamore Street. Brent had been stripping her assets for months. He had stolen the cabin first. Now he was coming for the main house. He was systematically erasing her legacy to pay his debts. I printed the deed. I had him. The next morning, I met Tessa at her office. I placed the cabin deed on her desk. He started before she died. I said. Tessa looked at the document. Her face grim. "This is grand larceny, Kennedy, and elder abuse. If we can prove she was in the ICU on this date, I can get the hospital admission records." I said. Tessa nodded. "Okay, this is enough for the injunction. I am going to court right now." She grabbed her briefcase. "But Kennedy, the court is slow. Even with this, the judge might not sign the order until this afternoon, and the closing is tomorrow morning." "What happens if the order isn't signed in time?" "Then the closing happens," Tessa said. "And once the money is wired, it is gone. We can sue Brent to get it back. But if he owes Sharks, that money will vanish in 10 minutes. So we have to stop the wire." I said. Tessa looked at me. "You have to go to that closing. I know. You have to walk into that room and be the physical embodiment of a problem they can't ignore. You have to make the escrow officer afraid of her own shadow." "I will." I said. Tessa handed me a folder. "This is a limited preservation order. The clerk just emailed it to me. It is not an injunction. It doesn't stop the sale. All it says is that all parties must preserve documents related to the estate. It is a slap on the wrist. But it is a court document with a seal. Use it, wave it around, make it look bigger than it is." I took the folder. "I need a witness." I said. I can't go alone. Take someone who isn't family, Tessa advised. Someone who won't scream. Someone who will just sit there and take notes. Witnesses make liars nervous. I called Chloe. She was my college roommate, now a librarian. Quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal. Chloe, I said, are you free tomorrow morning? What do you need? She asked. I need you to sit in a lobby and watch a crime happen. Friday morning, closing day. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I hadn't really slept. I showered and put on my armor, my dark blue consulting suit, a crisp white shirt, and the heels that made me 2 inches taller. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the grieving daughter. I looked like a liability. I packed my briefcase, the trust documents, certified copies, the letter from my mother, the fake deed for the cabin, the hospital timeline, the affidavit from Harold, the email thread with the typo, the preservation order from the court. I met Chloe in the parking lot of Pinecrest Title at 9:45. The sky was gray and heavy with rain. Chloe looked nervous. Do I have to say anything? She asked. No. I said, just sit in the lobby. Keep your phone out. If you hear shouting, record it. If I don't come out in an hour, call the police. Jesus. Kennedy. I am serious. We walked in. The receptionist looked up. She recognized me from my visit with the examiner. Her eyes went wide. Ms. Wood, she said, her voice tight. We weren't expecting you. I am sure you weren't, I said smoothly. I am here for the closing on file 4492. She picked up the phone and whispered something. A moment later, the door to the conference room opened. Brent walked out. He was wearing a suit, looking every inch the grieving, responsible seller. But when he saw me, his face twitched. Kennedy, he said, his voice loud enough for the lobby to hear. What are you doing here? I told you. This is a private financial meeting. You are causing a scene. I am not here to cause a scene. Brent, I said, my voice calm, projecting just enough to reach the back offices. I am here as the trustee of the Eleanor Hale Trust, and I'm here to ensure that no fraudulent transfers occur today. The door behind him opened wider. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a suit that was expensive but ill-fitting across the shoulders. He had cold, dead eyes. Gavin Rail. He looked at me, then at the briefcase in my hand. He didn't speak. He just stared, and behind him, I saw the buyers, a young couple, looking terrified. The woman was visibly pregnant, clutching her husband's hand, and the escrow officer, the woman who had told me to come, she was standing at the head of the table, holding a pen. She looked at me and gave a barely perceptible nod. I walked past Brent. I walked past Gavin Rail. I walked right into the conference room and placed my briefcase on the mahogany table. I am Kennedy Wood, I said to the room. And nobody is signing anything until you look at what is in this folder. Brent rushed back in. Get her out of here, he shouted, finally losing the mask completely. Call the security. She is trespassing. Gavin Rail moved to block the door. The air in the room grew thin. I opened the briefcase. I turned to the buyers. I am sorry to do this to you, I said, but if you sign that paper, you are buying a stolen house, and I can prove it. I pulled out the trust document. The climax wasn't in the chase. It was right here, at a table covered in mints and pens. I looked at Brent. Your move. I thought. The conference room door at Pinecrest Title Escrow was heavy. A slab of frosted glass and mahogany that separated the chaotic noise of the lobby from the hushed, expensive silence of the closing table. I stood in front of it for 3 seconds, my hand hovering over the brushed steel handle. I was wearing my navy blue blazer, the one I wore to hostile board meetings, the one that made me feel like I was encased in armor. Underneath, my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a physical betrayal of the calm mask I had plastered onto my face. I looked back at Chloe, who was sitting in a wingback chair in the waiting area, pretending to read a magazine. She gave me a tiny, white-knuckled thumbs up. I took a breath that didn't quite reach my lungs, turned the handle, and pushed. The room was colder than the lobby. The air conditioning was humming aggressively, chilling the sweat that had formed at the base of my spine. The scene before me was a tableau of a lie in progress. At the far end of the long, oval table sat the escrow officer, the woman with the sharp eyes who had hinted I should come. Her nameplate read, Susan Vane. She was arranging stacks of paper with surgical precision. On the left side sat a young couple, the Millers. They looked exactly as Jennifer Sallow, their agent, had described them, anxious, hopeful, vibrating with that specific nervous energy of people about to spend every dollar they had ever saved. The wife was visibly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The husband was wearing a tie that was slightly too short, looking at the paperwork like it was a foreign language he was pretending to speak. And on the right side, closest to the door, was Brent. He was performing. There was no other word for it. He was leaning back in the high leather chair, one arm draped casually over the back, a sad, benevolent smile on his face. He was telling a story, his voice low and warm, the perfect image of the grieving widower passing the torch. She loved the garden, he was saying. I just hope you keep the hydrangeas. They were her favorite. It breaks my heart to leave them. But the house is just too big for one man now. He stopped when the door clicked shut behind me. The silence that fell over the room was immediate and absolute. Brent twisted in his chair. When he saw me, the benevolent smile didn't vanish instantly. It froze, then slowly curdled into a look of confusion that I knew was rehearsed. "Kennedy?" he asked, pitching his voice to sound concerned rather than furious. "What are you doing here?" I didn't look at him. My eyes locked onto the man sitting next to him. He was the man from the description Harold Dempsey had given me. The man from the Notary Journal story. Gavin Rail. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my car, but it fit him poorly across the shoulders, as if he was carrying too much muscle for the cut. He didn't have a briefcase. He had a folder, thick and black, resting under his hands like he was guarding it. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked bored. His eyes were flat, devoid of the social panic that was currently overtaking the Millers. I walked to the empty chair at the foot of the table. I placed my briefcase down with a deliberate thud. "I am here for the closing," I said. Jennifer Sallow, the buyer's agent, looked from me to Brent. She looked relieved, but also terrified. "Ms. Wood," she said. Brent stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked at the escrow officer, then at the buyers, offering an apologetic grimace. "I am so sorry. Folks, this is my stepdaughter. She is having a very hard time with her mother's passing. Kennedy, please, this is a private financial meeting. You are embarrassing yourself. I am not embarrassed." "Brent," I said, my voice steady, though my knees felt like water. "And I am not just your stepdaughter today." I turned to the Millers. The husband had half risen from his chair, looking like he wanted to intervene but didn't know the rules. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," I said, "my name is Kennedy Wood. I am the daughter of Eleanor Hale, the woman who owned this house." Brent moved toward me. "That is enough," he snapped. "Susan, call security." "She is trespassing." Susan Vane didn't reach for the phone. She sat back in her chair, her hands folded over the file. "Let her speak." "Mr. Hale," Susan said. Her voice was cool, neutral. Brent stopped, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. He looked at Gavin Rail. Gavin didn't move. He just watched me, tapping his index finger on the black folder. I unzipped my briefcase. My hands were shaking. So I moved slowly, deliberately. I pulled out the certified copy of the trust. "I am the trustee of the Eleanor Hale Revocable Living Trust." I said to the room, "I have documentation proving that the property located at 1402 Sycamore Street was transferred into this trust 5 years ago. My mother, the grantor, is deceased. That makes me the legal owner of this property." I slid the document down the table toward Susan Vane. Brent laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that made the pregnant woman flinch. "This is ridiculous," he said, turning to the buyers. "She is weaponizing her grief. She can't accept that her mother left everything to me. That trust she is waving around? It was revoked. Years ago, Eleanor dissolved it when we got married. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to stop, to just go away, while his jaw worked with suppressed rage. Kennedy, don't do this. Don't ruin this for these nice people just because you are angry at me. I ignored him. I watched Susan Vane. She opened the document. She scanned the first page, then flip-ped to the schedule of assets. She checked the signature page. Then she looked up at Brent. "Mr. Hale," she said, "this document is dated 5 years ago. The deed you provided for the transfer to yourself relies on a will dated 3 months ago." "Exactly," Brent said, spreading his hands. "The will supersedes the trust. The will specifically revokes all prior trusts. That is standard language." Susan looked at the document again. "A will can revoke a trust only if the trust terms allow it to be revoked by will," she said quietly. "And if the property was titled in the name of the trust, a will from the individual cannot transfer it unless the assets were pulled back out first." She looked at her computer screen. The deed was transferred from the estate of Eleanor Hale, not the trust. If the house was in the trust, the estate had no authority to deed it. Gavin Rail spoke for the first time. His voice was like grinding stones, low, rough, and dismissive. The title search was clean. He said, "The deed is recorded. The chain of title shows Brent Hale as the owner. You are the insurer. You insure the risk. We are closing today." Susan looked at Gavin. She didn't like being told how to do her job. I cannot ignore a competing claim presented at the table. "Sir," I stepped in. "It is not just a competing claim," I said. "It is fraud." I reached into my briefcase again. I pulled out the folder marked Evidence. "I have a timeline from the oncology center," I said, placing the sheet on the table. "Brent claims the new will, the one that supposedly revoked this trust, was signed on March 15th. On March 15th, my mother was in a chemotherapy chair for 9 hours. She was heavily sedated. She couldn't hold a pen, let alone sign a legal document revoking her estate plan." Brent slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "She signed it," he shouted. "She was lucid. You weren't there. Kennedy, you were at work. I was the one taking care of her. I was the one holding her hand." He pulled a document from his own jacket pocket, a folded, crinkled copy of the will. "Here," he yelled, thrusting it at Susan. "Look at the stamp. It is notarized. A state official witnessed it. You are going to take the word of a jealous daughter over a notarized legal document?" Susan took the will. She looked at the stamp. I looked at it too. From where I stood, I could see the smudge I had noticed before. The blue ink of the notary seal was blurred on the right side, as if the stamper had pulled it away too quickly, and the date, March 15th. I pulled out the next piece of paper from my briefcase, the affidavit. "This is an affidavit my mother signed 2 years ago," I said. "She included it in her trust documents because—" I paused, looking at Brent. He was breathing hard, a sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead, because she was afraid of this exact situation. I continued. I slid the paper to Susan. It lists her known signature styles. It also lists the specific pen she used for all legal documents, a distinct, felt-tip calligraphy pen she had used since her teaching days. I pointed to the will in Susan's hand. That signature is in ballpoint, and the loop on the E is wrong. My mother's E always slanted backward. That one slants forward. Susan compared the two documents. The silence stretched, thin and tight. The Miller husband spoke up. His voice was high and thin. "What is going on?" he asked. "Is the house? Is it not his?" Jennifer Sallow put a hand on his arm. "Wait," she whispered. Susan Vane closed the folder containing the will. She looked pale. "I need to make a call," she said. She picked up the phone on the console. She didn't dial an extension. She dialed a programmed number. "Granite Bay." She said into the receiver, "This is Susan Vane at Pinecrest. I have a code red on file 4492. Yes, adverse claim at the table. Allegations of forgery. Documentation presented. She listened for a moment. Yes, I have the deed, but the trust predates it, and the signature looks problematic. Brent was staring at her, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a man watching his parachute fail to open. Gavin Rail stood up. He walked around the table to where Susan was sitting. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough to loom. "Let me talk to them," he said to Susan. Susan ignored him. "Okay," she said into the phone. "I understand." She hung up. She looked at the buyers. "I am sorry," she said. Granite Bay. Underwriting is pulling the commitment. We cannot insure this title. "What does that mean?" the pregnant wife asked, tears welling in her eyes. "It means we cannot close," Susan said. "Not today. Not until a court determines who actually owns this house." "No!" Brent shouted. He looked wild now. The charm was completely gone, replaced by a raw, frantic desperation. "You can't do this. The money. The wire. It has to go out today." Gavin Rail stepped in. He placed a hand on Brent's shoulder, a gesture that looked comforting but was clearly a restraint. "We can bond around it," Gavin said to Susan. His voice was calm, corporate, and utterly menacing. "We will sign an indemnity agreement. We will put up a surety bond for the value of the claim. Close the deal. Hold the funds in escrow if you have to, but release the deed." Jennifer Sallow shook her head. "Absolutely not," she said. "My clients are not taking title to a property with a clouded deed. Bond or no bond, we are out." She turned to the Millers. "Stand up," she said. "We are leaving." The Millers scrambled up, grabbing their coats. The wife was crying freely now, looking at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "I am sorry," I whispered to them. "I really am." They didn't answer. They just ran for the door. Brent watched them go. He looked at the empty chairs, then at me. "You did this," he hissed. "You spiteful little—" He took a step toward me. Gavin held him back. Brent shook him off. He pointed a shaking finger at my face. "You think you are so smart. Kennedy, you think you found some treasure map. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I am stopping you from stealing my mother's house to pay off your loan sharks." The room went dead silent. Gavin Rail's head snapped toward me. His eyes narrowed to slits. Brent went white. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "I know about Hale Construction's debts." I said, "I know about the private loans. I know about the lien you filed against the house and paid off 2 weeks ago. I know you need this cash to stay out of prison." Brent looked at Gavin. Panic was vibrating off him in waves. "She doesn't know anything," he said quickly to Gavin. "She is guessing. She is crazy." He turned back to me, desperation making him sloppy. "You are lying. You don't have proof of anything. You say you found a trust? Where? In the safe deposit box?" "Yes," I said. "Liar," he screamed. "You couldn't have gotten into that box. You didn't have the key. I checked your apartment. I checked your purse. You never had the key." The words hung in the air. Susan Vane looked up from her notes. I stared at Brent. "I never told you I found the key." "Brent," he froze. His mouth was still open, but the sound had died. "I never told you I found the lockbox under the closet floor." I said, my voice low and hard. "I never told you I had the key to the bank box. The only way you would know that I didn't have it is if you were looking for it." I looked at Gavin Rail. He just admitted to searching my belongings. I said, "And he admitted he knew about the safe deposit box but couldn't access it, which means he knew the trust was inside." Brent looked around the room. He saw Susan writing something down. He saw the empty chairs where the buyers had been. He saw the ruin of his plan. He turned on his heel. "This isn't over," he shouted. "I will see you in court. I will get an eviction order. You are dead. Kennedy, you hear me? You are dead." He stormed out of the room, the door slamming against the wall. I stood there, my legs finally giving out. I grabbed the back of the chair to steady myself. Gavin Rail didn't leave immediately. He picked up the black folder from the table. He smoothed his suit jacket. He walked toward me. I gripped the chair tighter. He stopped 2 feet away. He smelled of expensive cologne and something metallic. He didn't speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He raised it and took a picture of me. Then he reached out and took a picture of the open briefcase on the table, specifically the folder labeled Trust. "Why are you doing that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Document preservation," he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. He looked at me one last time. It wasn't a glare, it was an appraisal, like he was estimating the cost of removing a structural problem. "Tell your stepfather he has until Monday," Gavin said. Then he walked out. I sank into the chair. Susan Vane was looking at me. She looked shaken. "Ms. Wood," she said, "are you okay?" I nodded. "I need copies of everything you have in the file." I said. She nodded. "I will make them. I am canceling the file." "Kennedy, I am sorry. I didn't know." "It is okay," I said. I looked at the door where Gavin had exited. He has until Monday. Today was Friday. I had stopped the sale. I had won the battle. But looking at the empty doorway, feeling the phantom weight of Gavin Rail's stare, I realized I hadn't won the war. I had just trapped a rat in a corner, and I had locked myself in the room with him. I packed my documents back into the briefcase. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work the zipper. I walked out to the lobby. Chloe jumped up when she saw me. She had her phone in her hand, the camera app open. I heard shouting. She said, rushing over, "Are you okay? Did he hit you?" "No." I said, "He didn't hit me." I looked at the glass doors. The rain was coming down hard now, blurring the world outside. We stopped it. "Chloe," the buyers walked. She hugged me. "Thank God." "So it is over?" I thought about the photo Gavin took. I thought about the text message. "You don't understand what you are interfering with." "No," I said, pulling my coat tight around me. "It is just starting." The drive back to the motel was a blur of gray rain and red taillights. Chloe followed me in her car until we reached the highway, then peeled off with a wave. I was alone. I didn't go back to the house. I couldn't. Not yet. I sat in the motel room, the adrenaline crash leaving me shivering. I called Tessa. "He admitted it?" Tessa asked, her voice cracking with excitement through the phone. "He actually said he checked your purse?" "In front of the escrow officer." I said. She wrote it down. "That is gold. Kennedy. That goes in the affidavit. We have him on spoliation, invasion of privacy, and constructive fraud. The judge is going to crucify him." "And the closing?" "Dead." I said. The underwriter pulled the plug. The buyers ran. Tessa let out a whoop. "You did it. You actually did it." I didn't celebrate. "Tessa," I said, "the man with him, Gavin Rail. What about him?" "He told me to tell Brent he has until Monday." The line went silent. "Monday," Tessa repeated. "That is the deadline for the loan." I said, "The private loan. If Brent doesn't pay by Monday, then they come for the collateral." Tessa said, "Or the borrower. Kennedy, you need to be careful. If the sale is dead, Brent is going to be desperate. He is going to try something else." "Like what?" "Like filing for an immediate eviction to get you out, so he can try to sell to a cash for homes outfit that doesn't check title as closely. Or he comes to find the trust documents." I said, "Exactly. Where are they?" "In my briefcase." "Put them in a safe," Tessa commanded. "Not in the room. Does the motel have a safe?" "No." "Then go to a bank. Rent a box. Today. Do not keep those papers on you." "I will," I said. I hung up. I looked at the briefcase. I grabbed my keys and drove to the nearest bank. A national chain. Not Ridgeway. I rented a box. I put the original trust documents, the letter, and the affidavit inside. I kept only the photocopies. I felt lighter when I walked out. The truth was safe, but as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Brent. "You think you won. You just burned the house down with both of us inside." I deleted the text. I drove toward the house. I had to go back eventually. My clothes were there. My life was there. And if I stayed away, he could change the locks. He could destroy the interior. I pulled onto Sycamore Street. The house looked dark. Brent's car was there, but no lights were on. I parked on the street, not the driveway. I walked up the path, my senses on high alert. I unlocked the door. The house was silent. I walked into the kitchen. It was empty. I went upstairs. My bedroom door was open. I walked in. It was empty, not just devoid of people. Empty. My mattress was gone. My dresser was gone. My clothes were gone. The room was stripped to the subfloor. I ran to the guest room. Brent's things were still there. I ran back to the hall. He had evicted me. Not legally, physically, while I was at the closing, while I was renting the safety deposit box, he had hired someone, or done it himself, to clear my room. Panic rose in my throat. My laptop? My backup drive? I ran to the window. In the backyard, near the tool shed, there was a pile, a wet, sodden pile of clothes, wood, and bedding. He had thrown it all out the window. I ran downstairs and out the back door. The rain was soaking everything. My blazers, my silk shirts, my photos. The mattress was leaning against the shed, soaking up mud, and in the middle of the pile, my laptop, smashed. The screen was shattered, the keyboard bent in half. I stood in the rain, staring at the destruction. This wasn't an eviction. This was a tantrum. This was violence. I heard the back door creak. I spun around. Brent was standing on the porch. He was holding a beer. He looked drunk. "I told you," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "You are a guest. Guests don't dictate terms." "You destroyed my property," I said, shivering. "I cleaned the room," he corrected. "For the next buyer. There is no next buyer." "Brent." I stopped the sale. He took a sip of beer, for now, but Monday is coming. "Kennedy, and if I go down..." He smiled, a cruel, broken expression. "I am taking the house with me." He turned and went back inside, locking the door behind him. I was locked out, in the rain, with my life in a pile of mud. I looked at the shattered laptop. He thought this would break me. He thought stripping me of my comfort, my clothes, my data would make me retreat. He didn't know me. I reached into the pile and found my jewelry box, the one he hadn't sold yet. It was cracked, but the latch held. I picked it up. I walked to my car. I wasn't going to cry. I was past crying. I got in the car and turned on the heat. I had the trust. I had the law. And now, I had nothing left to lose. I pulled out my phone and dialed Tessa. He locked me out. I said, "And he destroyed my things. I am calling the police," Tessa said. "No." I said, "The police will just call it a civil dispute again. They won't let me back in tonight. Then come to my place." Tessa said, "I will." I said, "But first..." "First what?" "First, I am going to make sure the buyers know." I hung up and texted Jennifer Sallow. "Brent has destroyed the interior of the house. Even if you clear title, tell your clients the property is damaged. Do not let anyone sign anything." Then I drove away. As I turned the corner, I saw a car pull out from the side street, a black sedan. It followed me for 2 blocks, then turned away. Gavin Rail. He was watching. He was waiting for Monday. I gripped the steering wheel. "Bring it on," I whispered. The rain had stopped by the time the sun rose on Saturday, leaving the world scoured and gray. I hadn't slept. I was sitting on the floor of Tessa's guest room, wearing a borrowed t-shirt, staring at the wall. I thought the confrontation at the closing table would be the end. I thought exposing the fraud, watching the buyers flee, and seeing the underwriter pull the plug would force Brent to retreat. I was wrong. A cornered animal doesn't retreat. It bites. At 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Tessa, calling from her office. "He filed," she said, her voice tight. "Filed what?" I asked, rubbing my grit-filled eyes. "A surrender?" "An eviction," she said. "A new one. He filed an emergency motion for possession this morning. He is claiming you are trespassing and harassing a lawful sale. He is arguing that your behavior at the title company was a tortious interference with a contract and that you are mentally unstable and dangerous to the property." I laughed. A dry cracking sound. He destroyed my room. Tessa. He threw my life into the mud. And he is calling me dangerous? He is trying to force a judgment before the probate court can rule on the trust. Tessa explained. He wants a piece of paper that says he has possession. If he gets you out legally, he can change the locks and bring in a private buyer, someone who doesn't care about title insurance, someone like Gavin Rail's friends. I stood up, the exhaustion falling away like a heavy coat. The anger was back. Cleaner this time. Sharper. He wants a fight, I said. Fine, but we aren't fighting on his terms anymore. I drove to Tessa's office. I didn't go in looking like a victim. I sat down at her desk and pulled out a notepad. We need to flip the board. I said, Brent is banking on the Millers, the buyers, being passive. He thinks they are just collateral damage. We need to make them witnesses. Tessa nodded slowly. If they testify that he produced a fraudulent will at the table. Exactly, I said. Write a letter to Jennifer Sallow. Tell her that we are preparing a criminal complaint for attempted fraud. Tell her that her clients, the Millers, are listed as victims. Ask if they are willing to provide a sworn statement about what they saw. The rushed stamp, the mismatched dates, Brent's behavior. Tessa started typing. If we turn the buyers into accusers, I said, Brent isn't just fighting a stepdaughter, he is fighting the public. By noon, we had a response. Jennifer Sallow called us back. The Millers were furious. They had lost their apartment deposit because of the cancellation. They were ready to talk. They confirmed that Brent had explicitly told them the estate was settled and that I was estranged and confused. They were ready to sign an affidavit that Brent had misrepresented the title status. We had him on fraud, but we needed to nail the coffin shut on the conspiracy. Then, the phone rang. It wasn't a client. It was a number I didn't recognize. Tessa put it on speaker. Ms. Linford? The voice was female, clipped, and professional. This is Karen Voss. I am the Chief Compliance Officer for Pinecrest Title Escrow. Tessa's eyes went wide. Compliance officers didn't make casual calls. They only called when a license was on the line. Ms. Voss, Tessa said, to what do we owe the pleasure? I am calling regarding the file for 1402 Sycamore Street, Voss said. After the incident yesterday, I pulled the physical file for an internal audit. I wanted to verify the chain of custody on the documents submitted by the seller, and, I asked, leaning in. Voss hesitated. I cannot give you the full report, as it is internal work product. However, I can confirm that the will presented by Mr. Hale was not received through our standard secure portal, nor was it mailed. How did it get there? Tessa asked. There is a notation in the margin. Voss said, it was dropped off at the rear entrance of our building on Tuesday night, hand-delivered to a night courier. But the courier log wasn't signed. A side channel, I whispered. Someone inside Pinecrest accepted it without logging it, Voss said, her voice dropping lower. We are investigating our own staff, but I thought you should know. The document didn't just appear, it was planted. Thank you. Ms. Voss, Tessa said. The line clicked dead. I sat back, stunned. Gavin Rail wasn't just a thug in a suit. He had reach. He could plant documents inside a title company. This was organized. It was terrifying. But it was also clarifying. I looked at Tessa. We need the court order. I said, now. We went to the courthouse at 2:00. This time, we didn't get the magistrate. We got Judge Holloway. A stern man with a reputation for hating nonsense. Tessa laid it all out. The trust, the fake will, the Miller's statement, the call from the compliance officer, the destruction of my property, Brent's lawyer, a sweating, nervous man who looked like he had been hired an hour ago, tried to argue that this was a family misunderstanding. Judge Holloway looked at the photos of my smashed laptop and the muddy mattress. This does not look like a misunderstanding, counselor. The judge rumbled. This looks like a demolition. He signed the order right there. Temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. The property at 1402 Sycamore Street was frozen. No sale, no transfer, no eviction. And Brent was ordered to grant me immediate access to the home to retrieve my personal effects. It wasn't a victory, it was just oxygen. It bought us time to prepare for the full trial. But as we walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I sat on a bench outside the courtroom while Tessa went to file the paperwork. I thought about my mother. For 3 months, I had let Brent handle everything. I had told myself I was too busy with work, too devastated by the loss to deal with the paperwork. I had told myself that probate was just admin, but that was a lie. I had avoided the probate because talking about her estate felt like admitting she was really gone. It felt like planning the end. As long as the house was just Mom's house, she was still there in the abstract. If I transferred the deed, if I executed the trust, I was closing the book. My avoidance had created the vacuum Brent stepped into. My grief had been his opportunity. I wiped a tear from my cheek. I am sorry. Mom, I whispered, I am listening now. I drove back to Sycamore Street with a sheriff's deputy following me. The court order gave me the right to enter, and I wasn't going to do it alone. The house was dark. Brent wasn't there. His car was gone. The deputy waited in the hallway while I walked through the rooms. The mess in the backyard was still there, a monument to Brent's rage. But inside, the house felt eerily sterile. He had cleaned up the kitchen. He had vacuumed the hallway. I walked to the closet where I had found the lockbox. I had moved the trust documents to the bank, but I had returned the empty metal box to the hole under the floorboards, along with a photocopy of the letter. I had wanted to see if he would find it. A trap. I knelt down and pried up the loose board. My breath hitched. The hole was empty. The lockbox was gone. The photocopy was gone. Nothing else in the closet was disturbed. The coats were hanging in the same order. The boots were aligned. Someone had come here, knowing exactly where to look, and taken the box. He knew. He hadn't just checked my purse. He had interrogated the house. Or he had seen me find it. A chill crawled up my neck. Had there been a camera? Or was he watching from the street that night? I stood up, dusting off my knees. He took the bait. He thought he had the evidence. He would open that box and find nothing but air and a photocopy. But the fact that he came for it meant he was desperate for the contents of the letter. The letter that mentioned his debts. My phone buzzed. A text from Brent. I stared at the screen. You got your pause. Now let me get what I is owed. I read it again. What I is owed. Not what I own. What I am owed. He didn't just want the house proceeds to pay the debt. He felt entitled to something else. Something he thought was in that box. He thought my mother had left money. Hidden money. And then it hit me. The second property. The cabin. The letter in the bank box. The one I had read in the vault. Had a line I had glossed over in my panic. If you are reading this, it means someone ignored what I asked. Do not confront him alone. But there was another line, further down, that I remembered now. I secured the other place. The other place. The cabin in Hollow Fern. If Brent had already transferred the deed to the cabin fraudulently, why hadn't he sold it yet? Why was he focusing on the house? Because the cabin wasn't the asset. The cabin was the hiding spot. I looked at the deputy. I am done here, I said. I grabbed a few changes of clothes that had survived the purge, things Brent had missed in the laundry room, and left. I didn't go back to Tessa's. I needed to see the end of the trail. I drove north. It was a 4-hour drive to Hollow Fern, New York. The sun set while I was on the highway, turning the sky into a bruised purple. I called the local sheriff's department in New York on the way. Explaining the court order and requesting a civil standby at the property, I wasn't walking into the woods alone. I met the deputy at a gas station just off the exit. He was a young guy, confused but cooperative once I showed him the paperwork proving I was the trustee. We drove to the lake in a convoy. The cabin was small, a rustic A-frame tucked behind a wall of pine trees. It looked abandoned. Leaves covered the porch. The deputy shone his flashlight at the door. Looks secure. Ma'am, he said. No sign of forced entry. I unlocked the door with the spare key on my keychain, the one my mother had given me years ago, just in case. The air inside was stale, smelling of pine and dust. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The power was cut. Using the deputy's flashlight beams, we swept the room. Furniture covered in sheets. A cold fireplace. It looked empty. But on the dining table, in the center of the room, there was something that didn't belong. A single manila envelope. It wasn't dusty. It was clean. I walked over to it. My name was written on the front in thick black marker. Kennedy Wood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I looked at the deputy. "I am going to open this," I said. He nodded, hand resting on his belt. I picked up the envelope. It was light. I opened the flap and pulled out the contents. 2 pieces of paper. The first was a photocopy of a handwritten note. My mother's handwriting. "Kennedy, if you are here, you found the second trail. Good. That means you didn't let him bully you. I knew he would come for the house, but he doesn't know about the accounts I moved here. I froze them. He can't touch them without the physical token. Trust no one who touched the notary. Love, Mom. Trust no one who touched the notary." I looked at the second piece of paper. It was a blurry photocopy of an ID card, a driver's license. I squinted at the image in the flashlight beam. The face was grainy, but the name was legible. Gavin Rail. But the photo wasn't the man I saw at the closing. The man at the closing had dark hair, sharp features, a scar on his chin. The man in this photo, the real Gavin Rail, was older, heavier, balding. The man at the closing wasn't Gavin Rail. He was an imposter. And if he wasn't Gavin Rail, then who was the man threatening me? Who was the man Brent was terrified of? I turned the paper over. There was a date written on the back. August 12th. That was the day my mother died. She had investigated him. She knew. The man in the suit wasn't a consultant. He wasn't even the lender. He was something worse, and he had given Brent until Monday. I looked out the window at the dark woods. The silence of the lake felt heavy. Watching. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was standing in the middle of a crime that had started before my mother took her last breath. I put the papers in my pocket. "Let's go," I said to the deputy as we walked out. My phone buzzed again. One new message. From an unknown number. "Did you find it?" I looked at the dark trees. I got in my car and locked the doors. Monday was coming, and I was ready. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope Kennedy's fight for her mother's legacy kept you on the edge of your seat. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below letting me know where you are listening from and what you would do if you were in Kennedy's shoes. Would you have gone to the closing? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, betrayal, and hard-won redemption. Share your thoughts in English in the comments section. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your doors locked.